"Sir, you need to come with us right now," the TSA agent snapped, gripping the old man's arm. Passengers glanced over, whispering. None of them knew that in exactly 47 minutes, Air Force One would be forced to make an emergency landing here, and the president himself would demand to see this suspicious old man. Harold Mitchell, 78 years old, had been sitting in Terminal B for 3 hours. To everyone around him, he looked like just another confused elderly passenger who'd missed his connection. His gray hair was neatly combed, his navy blue windbreakers showed signs of age, and his worn leather shoes had walked thousands of miles. But Harold wasn't waiting for a flight. He was waiting for the most important call of his career. Agent Sarah Martinez had been watching him on the security cameras. In her 2 years with TSA, she developed what she called a sixth sense for suspicious behavior. And this old man was checking every box. He'd been sitting in the same spot for hours, checking his watch every few minutes, occasionally walking to the window to scan the sky, and asking gate agents about emergency landing protocols. "That's not normal behavior for someone his age," Martinez told her supervisor, Agent David Brooks. "Elderly passengers usually just sit and wait. This guy's actively surveying the area." Brooks, a 15-year veteran of airport security, glanced at the monitor. "Maybe he's just anxious about flying. A lot of older folks get nervous." "Then why isn't he at his gate?" "His ticket says gate C14, but he's been camping out in Terminal B all afternoon. And look at this." Martinez pulled up another camera angle. "He's been writing notes in a small notebook, taking down flight numbers, departure times. That's intelligence gathering behavior." What they didn't know was that Harold Mitchell had spent 30 years as a Secret Service agent, protecting 4 different presidents. He'd coordinated emergency evacuations in hostile territories, managed crisis situations that never made the news, and developed contingency plans that saved lives. The call had come at 6:47 a.m. Harold was feeding his cat Sergeant when his secure phone, the one only 3 people in the world had the number to, began ringing. "Harold, it's Director Thompson. We have a code red situation." James Thompson had been Harold's protege 20 years ago. Now he was director of the Secret Service, and he was calling in a favor that could only mean one thing. The president was in immediate danger. "What's the situation?" "Air Force One is experiencing critical system failures over the Pacific. They're losing altitude and need an emergency landing site. Every major airport on the West Coast is either fogged in or dealing with security issues. We need Riverside Municipal." Riverside Municipal was a small regional airport, not equipped for presidential landings. It had been Harold's project in 1998. He'd identified it as a potential emergency site and helped develop the security protocols that would make a presidential landing possible. But those protocols had never been activated. Harold had driven straight to the airport, arriving just after 10 a.m. He'd been monitoring radio chatter, coordinating with his old contacts, and making sure every contingency was covered. To the TSA agents watching on camera, it looked like suspicious surveillance. In reality, it was a former Secret Service agent doing what he'd done his entire career, protecting the President of the United States. Agent Martinez approached Harold's seat with confident strides. "Sir, I need to see some identification." Harold looked up calmly. He'd been expecting this. "Of course." He handed over his driver's license and smiled slightly. "Is there a problem?" Martinez studied the ID. "Harold James Mitchell, 78 years old, address in Riverside. Clean record, no red flags in the system, but something still felt off." "Mr. Mitchell, you've been in this terminal for several hours. Your flight doesn't depart until tomorrow morning. Can you explain why you're here?" "Waiting for a friend," Harold replied simply. "What friend?" "We have no record of anyone else traveling with you." Harold's eyes moved to the window, scanning the sky. In his earpiece, so small it was virtually invisible, he could hear the radio chatter from Air Force One. They were 200 miles out and losing altitude fast. "Sir, I asked you a question." "I heard you. I'm waiting for a friend." Agent Brooks approached from behind. "Mr. Mitchell, we've had reports that you've been asking unusual questions about emergency landing procedures and security protocols. That's concerning behavior." Harold turned to face both agents. His expression remained calm, but those who knew him would have recognized the look. It was the same expression he'd worn during the assassination attempt in 1994, the NC bombing in 2001, and the White House security breach in 2000. Officers, I understand your concern. You're doing your job, and I respect that. But I need you to trust me when I say that I'm supposed to be here. Supposed to be here by who? Martinez pressed. Harold glanced at his watch. 23 minutes. Air Force One was getting closer, and the airport needed to be ready. I'd rather not say. That was the wrong answer. Brooks signaled to 2 additional TSA agents. Mr. Mitchell, we're going to need you to come with us for additional screening. Harold stood slowly. His joints protested. 78 years of age and 3 decades of high-stress work had taken their toll. But his mind remained sharp. He knew that resisting would only make things worse, and they needed to stay at the airport. Of course. Whatever you need. They escorted Harold to a small security office in the back of Terminal B. The room was windowless, with fluorescent lighting and 2 metal chairs separated by a small table. Agent Martinez sat across from him while Brooks stood by the door. Mr. Mitchell, let's start from the beginning. What brings you to Riverside Municipal Airport today? Harold considered his options. His clearance was classified, but lives were at stake. I'm here on government business. What kind of government business? Martinez exchanged a glance with Brooks. This was either a delusional elderly man or something much more serious. Sir, do you have any identification that would verify this government business? Harold reached into his wallet and pulled out a card. It was black, with minimal text and a government seal. Martinez had never seen anything like it. What is this? Secret Service identification? Retired but still valid for certain operations. Brooks leaned in to look at the card. This doesn't look like any government ID I've seen. Harold's earpiece crackled with an update. Air Force One was 15 minutes out. The president was safe, but they needed to land immediately. Officers, I need to ask you to contact your supervisor. There's going to be some unusual activity here in the next few minutes, and you need to be prepared. Before Harold could answer, every phone in the security office began ringing at once. Brooks answered the main line. Riverside Municipal Security. Yes. What? Are you sure? His face went pale. Yes, sir. Right away. He hung up and looked at Harold with new understanding. That was the control tower. They've just been ordered to clear all airspace for an emergency presidential landing. Air Force One is inbound. Martinez stared at Harold, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. You knew this was going to happen. It's my job to know. The door burst open and Airport Director Patricia Wong rushed in, followed by 3 men in black suits with earpieces. Where is he? Where's Agent Mitchell? Harold stood. I'm here, Patricia. Good to see you again. Wong had worked with Harold during the development of the Riverside Protocol. She knew exactly who he was and what his presence meant. Harold, thank God you're here. We've got 18 minutes to execute the emergency landing procedures. The runway needs to be cleared, security perimeters established and medical teams positioned. Are you ready? Agent Martinez felt her world tilting. Ma'am, this man has been detained for suspicious behavior. Agent Martinez, one of the men in suits interrupted, flashing his Secret Service credentials. This man is Harold Mitchell, former special agent in charge of Presidential Protection Detail. He's here because we asked him to be here, and right now, he's the only person who can coordinate the safe landing of Air Force One at this facility. Harold turned to Martinez and Brooks. Officers, I apologize for the confusion. I couldn't reveal classified information until the situation became public. But I need your help now. This airport is about to become the most secure location in California, and we need every trained security professional we can get. Through the office window, they could see airport personnel rushing around, clearing the main runway and setting up barriers. Emergency vehicles were streaming onto the tarmac. Harold pulled out his phone and began making rapid calls. His voice had transformed from that of a confused elderly man to the commanding tone of someone accustomed to life or death decisions. Control Tower, this is Agent Mitchell. Activate Riverside Protocol immediately. Medical team to Station 7. Security perimeter at 500 meters. All civilian aircraft grounded until further notice. Agent Martinez watched in amazement as the suspicious old man she'd been monitoring became the operational commander of a presidential emergency landing. Sir, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. Harold smiled as he continued coordinating the massive operation unfolding around them. Agent Martinez, you were doing exactly what you were supposed to do. Good security officers are suspicious of unusual behavior. You couldn't have known. A new voice came through Harold's earpiece. Mitchell, this is Air Force One. We have visual on Riverside Municipal. How's our runway looking? Air Force One, this is Mitchell. Runway is clear. Emergency services positioned. Security perimeter established. You are cleared for emergency landing runway 27. Copy that, Mitchell? It's good to hear your voice again. Harold's eyes grew misty for a moment. He recognized the voice. Colonel Sarah Davis, the pilot who'd flown him on his final presidential mission 5 years ago. 10 minutes later, the distinctive blue and white aircraft appeared on the horizon. Air Force One, struggling with engine problems but still majestic, descended toward Riverside Municipal's main runway. Harold stood at the terminal window coordinating between ground crews and the aircraft. Agent Martinez stood beside him, watching the most powerful man in the world's airplane make an emergency landing at their small regional airport. Agent Mitchell, she said, what happens now? Now we do what we've always done. We protect the president. The landing was flawless. Air Force One touched down smoothly and taxied to the secure area that Harold had helped design 25 years earlier. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, and black SUVs moved into position. As the airplane's door opened, President Johnson appeared at the top of the stairs. He scanned the crowd of officials and security personnel until his eyes found Harold. The president walked directly to him, ignoring protocol and the crowd of VIPs waiting to greet him. Harold Mitchell, President Johnson said, extending his hand. I should have known you'd be here. Just doing my job, Mr. President. Your job was supposed to end 5 years ago when you retired. Harold smiled. Mr. President, protecting you doesn't end with retirement. It's a lifetime commitment. President Johnson turned to the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, this man coordinated the emergency protocols that made our safe landing possible today. Agent Mitchell developed the security procedures for this facility, and when we needed someone we could trust to execute them flawlessly, there was only one person to call. The crowd applauded, but Harold remained focused on the security perimeter, still scanning for potential threats. Agent Martinez approached hesitantly. Mr. Mitchell, Agent Mitchell, I wanted to apologize again for detaining you. Harold turned to her with a gentle expression. Agent Martinez, you have nothing to apologize for. You saw suspicious behavior and you acted on it. That's exactly what a good security officer should do. In fact, I'm going to recommend you for additional training with federal agencies. We need more officers with your instincts. Harold glanced at the president, who was now safely surrounded by his full security detail. Agent Martinez. In this job you learn that sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust the system. You were part of that system today. Even when it seemed like you were working against me, you were actually helping to protect the president by maintaining security protocols. Agent Martinez. I understand you were the first to notice unusual activity in the terminal today. That kind of alertness is exactly what keeps our airport safe. Thank you, Mr. President. But I have to admit I almost made a serious mistake by detaining Agent Mitchell. President Johnson looked over at Harold, who was coordinating with maintenance crews. Agent Martinez, Harold Mitchell has been protecting presidents for 30 years. He's been shot at, threatened, and put his life on the line countless times. Being temporarily detained by airport security is probably the least dangerous thing that's happened to him this decade. 3 hours later, Air Force One was repaired and ready for departure. As the president prepared to board, he pulled Harold aside. Harold, I have a question for you. Yes, sir. How did you know to be here today? The engine failure happened suddenly. We didn't alert anyone outside the immediate security team until the last possible moment. Harold smiled mysteriously. Mr. President, a good agent doesn't wait for problems to happen. He positions himself where he'll be needed. You've been monitoring our flight path. I monitor everything that might affect your safety. It's what I do. President Johnson shook Harold's hand one final time. Harold, you're officially the most thorough retiree I've ever known. As Air Force One disappeared into the evening sky, Agent Martinez found Harold in the terminal quietly packing up his notebook and preparing to leave. Agent Mitchell, can I ask you one more question? Of course. How many times have you done something like this? prevented a crisis that nobody else knew was coming. Harold considered the question as he watched the presidential aircraft's lights fade in the distance. Agent Martinez, the best crises are the ones that never happen. If I've done my job right, you'll never hear about most of them. Will I see you again? Harold smiled as he walked toward the exit. Probably not. But if you ever see an elderly person behaving suspiciously at an airport, remember today, sometimes the most important people are the ones who don't look into it at all. Agent Martinez watched him walk away, a 78-year-old man in a worn windbreaker who had just coordinated the emergency landing of the president's airplane. She realized she would never look at airport security or elderly passengers the same way again. A week later, Agent Martinez received a letter from the Department of Homeland Security. She had been selected for an advanced training program in federal security protocols. The letter was signed by Director Thompson, but at the bottom, in handwriting, someone had added, "Excellent work at Riverside. Keep watching for suspicious behavior. H.M." Harold Mitchell returned to his quiet house in Riverside, fed his cat Sergeant, and settled into his favorite chair. His secure phone sat silent on the table beside him, but Harold knew it wouldn't stay silent for long. After all, protecting the president doesn't end with retirement. It's a lifetime commitment. And somewhere, 30,000 feet above the Pacific, the President of the United States was flying safely home, protected by security protocols, developed by a man who would forever remain vigilant, even when everyone else thought he was just a suspicious old man in an airport terminal.